Hi, everybody. Welcome into another episode of Bob and Chad. Today we've got a guest with us, Mr. Mike Nichols, 12-time IMCA stock car national champion. And so we're going to be talking about how you get to be a national champion. And evidently, Mike's got it somewhat perfected. He's done it 12 times, so I figure he'd be the guy to ask and talk about different things related to the stock car stuff, and of course, answer all your questions that you might possibly have, and so it's pretty good. So, what's new and exciting at Wehrs Machine, Chad?
Oh, we just got back from the Dome, and we started getting everything reorganized and emptying the vans out and sorting through the madness after a heck of a weekend down there in St. Louis. What a show. I mean, 30,000 people inside that arena screaming and hollering was quite a weekend. And we had a great time visiting with our customers and meeting new people. And, it was an awesome week. We didn't have any major catastrophes failure-wise. That place is always hard for me. I sit up and watch the features in the up top there, and I pretty much hold my breath for like 50 laps. And everybody's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, they're like, "You look like you're going to pass out." I'm like, "Yeah, I just kind of sit here and hold my breath and pray that none of our stuff breaks." And so it was, it's always an exciting time there, flying the fighter jets in the gymnasium. So, but it was a good week. Everything held together, and, we had a pretty good time there. So.
And you were down there too, right, Mike?
That is correct. Yeah. Got to watch, and it'd be kind of cool if they would put stock cars there, but I don't know if it'd be a very good venue for stock cars or not. The racetrack I think it needs a lot of horsepower. I don't know if we have enough horsepower to make that work.
It'd be worth a shot.
Yeah, well, yeah. It would be fun. Yeah. We'll be down there either way.
Yeah, every time I ever hear about it, everybody talks about how great it is. So I'm excited someday to get to go and watch it in person. I've watched a little bit of it on the screen here, but still it's nothing like being there in person. So what's the recipe for being a 12-time national champion, Mike? You've got it figured out, so we want to share it with everybody.
Getting out of bed at the right time, I guess. I don't know, on the right side. I'm not really sure. I don't know what the recipe it was for one, but it's the dynamics have changed. So with 12 of them, there's from 2002 in the first one, the numbers and how everything was calculated together was different then than what it is now. But there are some things that tend to remain the same. And I know you talk about this same thing at your classes, and it's really about doing the work in the shop. So having good people around you, good support. Chad knows very well that putting a quality piece on your race car, something that's not going to fall apart. If you're traveling 2 or 3 hours from home, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to finish the race. So the dynamics of a national championship, they have a lot to do with finishing races. Obviously you got to win some races too, but you need to be able to finish them. So there's a lot of things that go into that, and it's preparation and chop time, I'd say, are number one.
Well, that old saying is that the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary.
Well, that's a good point.
So, it's just one of them situations, you got to be focused and go after it with kind of a plan. And I know talking to you at the school, you said sometimes you don't always start out the year with a complete plan, and you sort of let everything kind of fall in place. And I know this year, you started out the year with maybe a little more or a few more obstacles than you had probably experienced in years past, and you still ended up working out for you. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it turned out to be a pretty good year. I think, anybody that races long enough is going to go through diversity, and, there's diversity in each season too. And it seemed like I went from starting out really good, and then the month of June, I couldn't do anything right. And then literally everything flipped, like just from one night to the next. And I joked about I picked up a penny that was heads up, and that's honest to God the truth. I picked up a penny hoping it would change my luck, and we drew the poll for a big feature down in Belleville, Kansas that night, and then I think clicked off about 8 out of 9 or something like that. So
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, but there again, it goes back to I never quit working either, and guys helping me, they never quit working either, and that's what you got to do. Just because you do have a couple of nights that don't go your way, you still gotta stay the course.
Yeah, no doubt about that. It's you can't give up on it. You can't let it slide, and it's pretty easy when adversities can kind of get you down, and you kind of have that attitude where, do I really care here? It's like, at the beginning of the schools, it's kind of like I talk about the fact where you need to ask yourself some questions at the beginning of the year. One of the questions is, why am I racing? And I always say, because come June, you're also going to say, why am I racing? and it's just one of those situations where it's kind of how it works, and it's the way it goes on everything. You just kind of keep your head. I think Chad and I can kind of testify to that, being in business, that you'll have some months that are a little quiet, and you're questioning if the world's going to crash or what's going to actually happen, and you just got to stay the course and hope like heck that everything works out fine.
You got to put yourself in the right position, right?
Yes.
Same thing with your business, but racing is a little bit unique. That there's not much around there that you experience the absolute highs of highs and the lows of lows like you do in anything else.
Right.
So it's kind of incredible in a way. So I told you guys, I had a text her there, so she went and grabbed the food off the grill. So sorry for that interruption.
No problem. God, you make me hungry. No, we might have to postpone the show for a half an hour so I can go get something to eat.
Yeah.
I better take a couple questions here. Jason says, what can I expect from my shocks when I get them back from BAT? I'm excited. Well, in my opinion, one of the best shocks that you're going to have to run on your race car. We pride ourselves in doing quality, and we've got two guys that really take pride in their work. And so it's kind of like, when they're building a shock, it's kind of like baking a cake for everybody. I mean, they spend a lot of time, and they dyno the things, and if it's not right, they keep changing it and get it right, so it's perfectly fine. And we've had pretty good luck with that. And the tech support that you get, in my opinion, from our company is very good. I pride myself on that. Bobby does a great job with tech support, and I don't do a whole lot of tech support anymore. Brandon and Bobby do most of it, and so those guys do a good job, and I'm not going to stand in their way when they're doing a good job. Doug Smith says he had fun hanging out with you for this past weekend in St. Louis, Mike. Good man away from the race car as well.
It was good hanging out with you, Doug. We had a good time, and yeah, hopefully we get to do it again next year. So, hey, one more comment on your first question there, Bob. I will say that So I bolted on, some of your shocks this year or whatever. And one thing that I would say pretty much anybody could expect from it is a lot of forward drive. So I was really impressed with that, and I can't wait to bolt it on and try it again, here this year, and spend a little bit more time on fine tuning and making things right.
Sure, you bet. You bet. Well, and that's the other thing that, we promise, if you get a set of shocks from us and they're not quite exactly what you think, if you think the right front needs to be held down more or whatever the case is, you just send it back and we change it, no charge. So definitely do our best to keep everybody in good shape. Bob, do you know the measurements for the metric lower on the stock car? I know the Chevelle is 5 1/8. Honestly, I would have no idea what the stock car one is. Hopefully one of my guys is listening and they might know and chime in here. I'm not familiar with the stock car measurement at all. Robert, senior GRT by BHE chassis at the PRI. That chassis color and that blue looked awesome. Well, I appreciate that, Robert. When we first got that thing powder coated and they unloaded it, I thought, oh my God, who puked on this thing? I thought it was awful. Well, then once we got it actually in the light and we got the parts hung on it and everything, it's like, this thing's starting to look a little better all the time. And it actually turned out really well. It's actually, the color is the silver off of a 2018 GM or Chevrolet GMC truck is what silver it was.
Bob, maybe we should ask.
What'd you say?
Let's ask Mike what he does on his lowers. Do you have a way to check your lowers when they're new, or do you have a measurement?
Yeah. So Chad, I'm looking at that measurement. From what point to what point are we talking about with that?
So
basically, if you lay that A-frame on a solid surface and you measure up to where the ball joint hole is, or where the ball joint is, on the Chevelle, it's from the floor up to the ball joint is 5 1/8 inches.
If you're talking if the A-frame is not installed, basically like the natural curve of the A-frame.
Right. Just you pull it off and sit it on the concrete and measure it up. The Chevelle is 5 1/8, and of course, it's not uncommon after you run a rough racetrack. Of course, now Troy just said he's 1 3/4 laying flat to the tip of the back. You'll have to explain that more in detail, Troy.
The metric one's definitely a lot flatter, and I know that from my time in the sport mod that it's a lot tougher to find a bent lower control arm in the sport mod than what it is in the stock car with that metric frame. That metric frame is, it's so flat, and if you're bending that, usually you can see it like right away.
Yeah, well, the modified, that's kind of a common thing, bending that lower A-frame, and you're not necessarily hitting stuff. The way we've got those right fronts ratcheted down and the way the load is on that right front, it's pretty common to bend that thing, and it definitely makes kind of a mess for everybody. Okay. Right rear chain, limiting pro and cons. Well, that's a good one for you, Chad.
Well, the right rear chain is at times very dangerous. So as you shorten that chain and hold the car on the right rear, you're going to increase the load and that spring rate, which is going to give you traction. And it's good until you get into a rough racetrack or holes, or if you're on the cushion a lot. So you really need to be careful when you're playing with that. You want to start from your ride height and go probably 1 3/4 inch, 1.5 inches loose. So when you jack the car up and the spring starts to relax, you want just a little bit of tension on that spring, so that when you're going down the straightaway, you always have load in that car as it's hiking. But like I said, the more you tighten it up, the more traction it is. But you really need to be careful with the track if there's any rough, or if you're up on the top and there's a heavy cushion. I seen a few cars there at the dome last week that almost looked like they had too tight of a chain on the right rear for how rough that place was. They'd go through a hole and then the front end would shoot to the right, and that's kind of what happens when that chain is too tight and it gets rigid, and you can really abuse your neighbor on the outside or get into the fence. So there's definitely traction in that. You do need to be extremely careful when you're ratcheting that down.
Yeah. And speaking of right front control arms, if you got too tight of a right rear chain, you might have too bend of the right front lower control arm.
Yeah.
Because it'll definitely send you in that direction. Let's see. Austin says he likes my hat. Well, I appreciate that. And I spent $10 on this hat, so it's $5 a show. And I'll have to wear it Christmas Eve too. So it's really actually well made, and it's pretty nice for $10. I mean, it's not a bad deal. I actually had one of those regular Santa hats, but it was too cheap. Made my head itch. Trashed it. Didn't want to go there. And we kind of got to be a little bit careful about too much ho, ho, ho. Speaking of ho, 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 Chad, talk about what we're going to do is we've got since we're all in the Christmas spirit here, we've got a giveaway that we're going to give away to one of the lucky participants in the questions tonight. Tomorrow we've got this computer program that they're going to put all the names in that asked a question, and we're going to draw 2 names out of the hat. One of them is going to be for, go ahead, Chad, tell what you got.
We'll give away a ball joint wrench. So it's got the upper and lower ball joints on each end of the wrench. So just a handy tool for taking ball joints in and out.
Perfect stocking stuffer. We're going to give away one of our angle gauges. Of course, all those people that go to the school know how much I push these angle gauges. I don't know how you could possibly race without one of these tools. I use this thing, the one that I've got in my toolbox is all beat up and it looks like it's been drugged through everything. These new gauges like we've got right here with the logo on them, they charge like your phone. So they come with an actual cord. It's kind of a trick trying to get this stuff in front of the camera here because right's left and left's right. But anyway, I have enough trouble with up and down, let alone left and right. Anyway, so Merry Christmas to you guys. 2 of you guys are going to get some type of a gift here. And those of you that might be thinking of it, tell that significant other it's still not too late to get one of those tools to put in your stocking stuffer. And of course, same with Wehrs and same with BHE. It's not too late to get a gift certificate for that Christmas present that you just couldn't find something for somebody to do. And I know Mike's a racer. I know he'd like to have those. Well, he's probably already got all those tools. But he's probably one of them racers that's hard to get by for because he's got everything already. Been doing it for so long that you tend to acquire stuff.
Roy sent me a couple pictures on that lower. So that's
awesome.
That's the reference picture there.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they are flatter then. All right. I see what you mean now. Yeah, thanks, Troy. I appreciate that. So anyway, inch and 3/4.
I got it too, Troy.
Yeah, the inch and 3/4 is the measurement.
You beat me to it.
Jared, Northern Sport Mod, do you want to run the pull bar higher on the rear end or in one of the lower holes? With it being solid, I'm not completely convinced that it makes a ton of difference. I really wouldn't go super high. Seems to me like the measurement that we always used to use was somewhere around 10.5 to 11 inches from the center of the housing to the center of the bolt on the top of the rear end. That's kind of a measurement that sticks in my head. That seems to be a pretty good place to go. If you go lower, if it was, say for example, if that had a bushing in it, like what they can run in Wissota, by going lower, you definitely would get more traction, but it takes a stiffer bushing because there's more load on it. Same thing if you had a torque link or a spring bar or something like that, you'd have to have a little stiffer combination for when you go lower. And so I think it's kind of like everything, you know, too low is probably a little bit finicky and too high is a little lazy. So kind of that measurement in the middle there, I think is probably pretty good.
Trevor.
Yes. Can I send my shocks for my Southern Sport Mod into you to have the work redone and valved to my suggestions? You know, as long as, you know, I'm not familiar with what the Southern Sport Mod uses for shocks, but yeah, if you tell us what you want that shock to be at certain numbers, we can definitely do that. That's not a problem. You know, we do that we've got some customers that we do their stuff that, you know, they found a combination that worked once upon a time and they're pretty stuck on that. And so we just always go off of that. It seems to work good for them. But yeah, that's no problem. We can definitely do that, Trevor. Now I understand, Troy, after you sent that picture, I probably wasn't understanding your wording, but after I rethought it, I did kind of think that was probably what you were talking about. Barrett, how specific do you guys get with the fuel to weight ratio with a crate motor? Are you pushing the limits on the scales with the least amount of fuel possible, or are you not worried about it and fill the tank full? I never run the tank full in a qualifying scenario. And I don't know, you know, I'm pretty finicky on that fuel load. It's an adjustable weight factor, so I'd rather have more weight on the car and run less fuel because, of course, number one, sport mod burning gasoline, you're not going to burn that much fuel off in an 18-lap race or a 20-lap race. So you can pretty much do that. But yeah, I definitely, you know, if the racetrack looks like it's fairly slick, we'll probably fill it up. But if the racetrack's, you know, got a little character or you got to be on the right rear hard, I won't probably put any more fuel in it than, you know, half full. We play with that fuel load quite a bit. How do you do that with the stock car, or do you run it full all the time? Of course, you guys are pretty short on rear percentage.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it takes weight to make traction. So we, I generally go with like what I call a 10% rule. So if let's just say your minimum weight is 3,000 pounds, as long as you're within, you know, 10% of that. So even up to 3,300. I mean, yeah, I know that, you know, lighter typically would be a little bit better, but I don't think 31 or, you know, 3150 is going to hurt you at all. But so I fill mine up actually before the heat, before the feature.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Rick, I always complain that I'm bottoming out my right front frame. The track is high bank, halfway up, and I don't bottom out until as I enter slower. Would adding some compression to the right front shock help slow that transition down when I know the racetrack is going to be fast, especially at the top? Most definitely, Rick. I think that would be the best thing to do is you don't necessarily want to change springs. You don't really want to change the car a whole lot. You just want to change the timing of the car, which a shock absorber is nothing but a timing device, of course. So that being said, running a stiffer compression, it's still going to get down there, but it won't get down there as fast. So in other words, instead of slamming down on that right front, it'll maybe just lay down on that right front to the point where it won't affect what the car's actually doing. We actually do that quite a bit. I mean, so we've got some customers that run some fairly fast half-mile stuff, and we've got them valve as high as a 5 compression, which normally we always run a 4. And I know there was even some other situations where we've even tried some 6s on some stuff, and I think if the conditions would have been right, the 6 probably would have been okay. But I think for the conditions that we tried, it maybe was a little bit too stiff. And it depends on the gas pressure, I mean, that's another thing you can do is, with the gas shock, you can up the gas pressure a little bit. And that's kind of almost like upping your spring rate in a way, but it's kind of like a balloon, just putting a little more air in the balloon in a confined area. It's going to help it a little bit too. But unless you're running somewhere where you can run a Schrader valve, you can't really change the gas pressure. So you've got to go with the valving. Tommy, how much camber and caster on an IMCA stock car? What do you normally run, Mike?
I saw that question pop up there, and I've been thinking about that. So what I've done might need to be altered. We need to get our car together a little bit and play around with the new ride height rule. And I don't think it's going to affect me very much, but I'm not trying to beat around the bush. So typically what I've run, like last year, let's say, right front, I would be at like -6 on the camber. And then, on the left front on the camber, I'd maybe shoot for like 1.5 degrees. And then I typically try to do, and this is just me personally, but I like 2 to 2.5 degrees of caster split. So the metric frame, that limits you a little bit on what you can do for caster. But generally those numbers are somewhere in the 4 to 2 range or 6 to 4 range.
Yeah.
So six right front, 4 left front.
Sure. That all makes sense. Well, and the problem with the way the rule is with that weight jack bolt, the left front, you can't put much in the left front. If you can get 1.5 degrees and still be legal, that's actually pretty good. Randy McDaniel says hi. Appreciate that, Randy. Today was a cold day in Iowa, so I was kind of thinking about some of those Arizona customers and California customers and Southern Texas customers. Because when I was in Texas a week ago, it was 77 degrees. I kind of almost wanted to stay. But with San Antonio, Texas being the 7th largest city in the United States, I didn't stay. I'm kind of used to my 1,400 people here in Roland, Iowa. Traffic's not super duper bad. And of course, I get up late, so everybody's already gone to work, so I don't have no problem with traffic. James, 4-bar school, where and when? 4-bar school is February 2nd and 3rd. It's at the BHE shop there in Ames, Iowa, and we'd sure love to have you come to it. That class is never a very big class, so it's always a good class to go to because, like I said, it's a smaller class, so and of course our classes we don't go over 65 people, but even at that point, 65 people sometimes can be a little bit more. I've done classes where we did that one out in Pennsylvania that time that was about 150, and That was actually almost a struggle. That was quite a few people. Jonathan seems to think he likes my hat too. Well, I appreciate that, Jonathan. That's pretty cool. Pat Fagan. So I'm a stock car. What do you do when stock car dives to the right when you're getting on the gas in the corners? Well, Mike's our stock car expert. That'd be a good one for you.
Well, Pat, if I'm on the outside, you let off the gas. And if I'm behind you, you stay in it. That would be the easiest thing. There's a lot of factors there. So, generally speaking, you do a great job, Bob, in your stock car class. I think at dividing it up between the first part of the corner, the middle of the corner, and the last part of the corner. So for me, if my car is tight in the center of the corner, which I think that's what Pat is asking, generally speaking, I would look at, say, my cross weight. And like I said, generally speaking, if I need to square up a little bit faster in the center of the corner to come off, in other words, if I need that car to turn a little bit better in the center, I'll try to lower my cross weight.
Okay. AM modified, best length for a pull bar. In my opinion, I still like that 28 to 32 inches. I mean, that's all pretty good numbers. I think ours is 28 and a half, I think, with the right amount of pinion angle in it is what I think ours actually comes out to be. But that's, the 28 to 32 inches seems to be pretty much where everybody's at, and seems to be very consistent. You get shorter, and shorter can give you a little bit more traction initially, but it doesn't last as long. You get longer, and then it can be a little bit lazy, gives you all kinds of traction down the straightaway, but you might get beat a car length off the corner, and you'll gain that back down the straightaway, but you can't give up that length off the corner, because when you get to the other end, well, unless you're planning on racing side by side and hoping for the best, somebody's not going to be happy about the situation. Ryan, Chad, how are the preload washers, Wehrs washers style pull bar? How much preload?
Yeah, we generally start with that pull bar with a 1/4 inch of preload. Some guys have been playing with more preload and more washers to get more travel out of it. So you kind of tune it to your car and how much travel you want to get. The Belleville washer bar, which is not IMCA legal, it is only USMTS and open IM or UMP legal. Very linear rate. I like that bar just because of its linear, like a spring bar is linear, but it decels like a puck bar. So there's not a lot of spring there to store that decel energy. So the Belleville washers tend to be a real linear curve, and then they bottom out when they coil bind. And then when they decel, they don't have a lot of decel rate. So they drive in the corner like a puck bar. So, but they're very tunable on that preload, and then adding washers to change the rate. So pretty good piece. We had quite a few of them there last week at the Dome.
Awesome. What's the best header for the B&B stock car?
I bet that's a question for me, Bob.
I'm thinking that's a question for you, Mike.
Well, Kyle, first of all, welcome to the stock car class. I see you say you're new to the class this year. So first advice I'd give is always be willing to go and ask for help, to your fellow competitors. But best headers. So years ago, we tried, some different ones. And I know there's different configurations. You can kind of put that exhaust in different directions. But to me, it's the 185V. It's a stepped header. It goes from 1 5/8 to 1 3/4. And I would call one of the best guys in this racing industry is Doug Schoenfeld. I would give Doug a call down there in Van Buren, Arkansas. and just ask Doug what he thinks. And I think Doug will tell you the same thing. It does go down. You're basically old school chassis style header. And you can pick them up. I'm pretty sure at BHE or Wehrs as well. But so that and I would, for reliability, I would look at getting them coated. So I get mine coated, right there from Doug. He does a great job. When I get them from him, it's it's ready to go, and they've lasted 2 to 3 years at running 50 nights a year.
That's cool. Yeah, that header deal, I know there's all kinds of different stuff, and Doug, I seen Doug actually spending a lot of time this year at the Super Nationals looking at stock cars. He was in the tech area. I noticed him looking at stock cars and stuff. So those guys, they put a lot of effort into this. I mean, they got a great company and they do a good job. They've been building headers forever, so they know what they're doing.
And I think the last month or so would probably tell you he spent a little bit of time looking at hobby stocks too.
Yeah, maybe that was the case too.
Being they're on a header now as well. So
okay, well maybe that was the case. Maybe I know I seen him stock cars and maybe it was some hobby stocks too. But let's see here. That's link. Trevor says his comments were filtered out. Can I send a metric sport mod shock to BHE as long as it's a rebuildable AFCO shock? I'm quite sure we could do it. If it's not an AFCO brand, we wouldn't be able to help you, Trevor. We do AFCO, Integra, and Penske. And I know it wouldn't be a Penske because they do not make anything like that. If it's a Bilstein shock, your guy that did your Bilsteins, Mike, would be the guy I would send them to. Either that or Speedway. Let's see. Jim, when setting the front ride heights, would you set it with your setup plates on your wheels and tires on? My tires are bigger than what my setup plates are set at. I would definitely set it with my tires. I'm not. We don't. The setup plates that we sell are the ones, of course, that Chad makes, and those plates you can actually adjust and get them set so they're identical to the ride height of the tire. And you can maybe explain it a little better than I can, Chad.
Yeah, so that's why we looked at the setup plates, and we wanted to be able to go across the board for all the classes and cover the different tire sizes. So we made them adjustable so that you could put the right circumference in there and get your stagger correct, so you could actually have some accurate measurements when you're on the ground. So I would probably recommend either using your tires and wheels for sure, or an adjustable plate like ours.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, because there's some out there that wouldn't give you the exact measurement, and you're really going to want to know the exact measurement that the car is going to roll onto the racetrack with. And you can calculate all that stuff, but why bother? I mean, it's not. Miscalculations can lead you to a problem, and we don't need problems. These dear race cars can give us enough fun in life. We don't necessarily need to add obstacles for them to go over. On an IMCA Northern Sport model, while running a drop cup on the right front, would it be a benefit to run a drop cup on the right rear? If so, use the same depth or different. Jay, I would definitely recommend running the drop cup on the right rear. I think that's very, very important on the sport mod. I think it works very well. We've had good luck with that. I think you've got a 2-inch drop cup for the right rear.
Yeah, we made 3 different variations now. Just with the softer left rear stuff, we get that left rear screw jack down so far. Now we had to raise the mounting location on the left rear cup and then drop the right rear cup even more because that left rear is so preloaded, even on the stock cars with that. When you run a soft left rear spring on a screw jack style car, you get that the spring table so low with that screw jack that we've had to manipulate our cups to get that spring table back where it is lower on the right. So it's always challenging to adapt to the trends in the sport, but definitely need to take that into consideration and try to get the right side below the left side for sure.
Gotcha. Trevor says they were on a QA1 metric frame mount front and rear. I'm not super duper sure who I would recommend for the QA1s because I'm not that familiar with that shock. I mean, I used to work on QA1s about 15 years ago, and we got out of that and kind of stayed with the AFCO and the Integra and the Penske stuff. Tommy, will it be possible to buy the class video? It'll actually be online, all but the New York class or the Pennsylvania class. That will not be online, but the stock car, the 4-link, and the 2-link school will be available online. The advantage to buying the school online is the fact that you can actually watch that school for a year. So in other words, you buy it, you can go back and you can go in there and rewind it. It's kind of like having a DVD in a sense. You can constantly use up more time, and so you get the benefit of reusing it. In the actual class, you kind of get the benefit of being in the moment of the class, a little more presence with questions, and the way our place sets, like when we go to the back shop, it's a little bit difficult to take the camera back there and do as good a job as I would like it to be, but it still covers it pretty well. USRA B-Mod GRT chassis. Do you guys recommend running 2 sliders or a slider on the left rear with the spring over the rear end on the right? Well, I mean, either way is a good way. I mean, the spring and actually that are the new sliders going to be like the prototype that we had out in the AFCO booth?
Yeah, we're transitioning to those here in the next few months. Yep.
That's a slick deal. That's a sweet deal.
We've really hit a home run there. I mean, if you really wanted it, you could request it now. We have some of them available, but and I don't know if I don't think I got a new one out here.
Well, the new one, the new slider has basically, it's kind of like a rod guide.
Yeah.
For a shock absorber on it.
Yeah.
That's pretty slick. That new slider, that definitely was pretty slick. I don't know if you want to go. I didn't answer that guy's question, but do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, I would run sliders just for the ease. I mean, on a 2-link car on the right rear, there isn't a lot of axle wrap on a 2-link car like there would be on a 4-link car. So going from the cage up onto the axle tube isn't really as noticeable on a sport mod or a B mod as it is on an A mod. So I would use the sliders just for the convenience of the coilover, easier to adjust. The screw jack cars can get a little bit tricky once in a while. Just like we were just talking to with the spring table, it's a lot easier to do clamp on mounts and lower that stuff. And but I mean, it's preference. I don't think there's really much of a difference when you go on an A mod and you go off the cage and onto the axle tube. It's considerable, or if you go behind, it's considerable. But
yeah, the only thing I would say that I like about the slider thing, you don't have the spring deflection that you do with it being on top of the housing.
Yeah.
Being on top of the housing, definitely that spring can ratchet itself up. And it's not that you have axle wrap, it's the, what am I trying to think of here? Rear steer. It's the rear steer that actually, when that left rear goes clear ahead, and then the right rear kind of starts to go back, it kind of twists those springs quite a bit to the point where it really can put some evil looking curves on those springs. So, but myself, if I had my choice, I'd probably go with the sliders. Simple, like Chad said, they're just simple, easy to work with. Springs stay in there, it works good. I don't think there's a big benefit handling wise one way or the other. Do you recommend running a limit chain on a USRA stock car? If I could run a limit chain on any stock car, I definitely would. I think having a left rear limit chain is a good idea. Now, we don't get the movement on the stock cars like we get on the sport mods or the modifieds, but I still think having a way of being able to run your arm as high as it will go, so it's got the most amount of angle in it possible, and limiting the movement to the point where if you're getting too much hike, you can put a chain on there and it controls the hike. Well, you still have the angle to get you the angle up off the corner to actually give you more traction, but with a chain, you're limiting so that it doesn't, give you too much movement. Have you guys experimented with the position-sensitive shock on the A-mods? And also, Chad, your big purple biscuit pull bar, how much preload and travel do you like to see on a Wasota A-mod? I don't know about the sensitive shock on the A-mod.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the position sensitive is legal in Wasota. I guess I don't do shocks, so I'm not sure what the rules are on that, if that's even legal. I know there are guys playing with that. You see a couple of them cars after they stop in the tech area and then they get to a point and they move. That's kind of what guys are using that for, is to maybe find some gray spots. But as far as the big purple biscuit, we generally start with an 1/8 inch of preload on that, and on that Wasota car, you're probably going to get 1 1/4 inch movement on that bar.
When changing the lower A-frame, how do you locate the bushings as far as how far in or out before welding them? Well, as far as, I'm not sure if you're asking on a stock car, but on a modified, the bushings are sized basically for the A-frame. And so we just install them. That's the case on a stock car too, isn't it? I mean, I don't think there's any measurement that I've seen those guys using.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a change in legality from sanctioning body to sanctioning body, but yeah, on our stuff, it's pretty easy for a tech guy to measure from the center of the bolt out to the ball joint.
Kyle, best header on a B&B stock car for fitment and reliability. Well, we kind of talked about the Schoenfeld product there. 8-inch drive shaft yoke. I would think you would want that. Do you run an 8-inch drive shaft yoke, Mike?
I don't. I do like running as long as you can, and we're big into rim polishing, so we would polish our yokes for sure. But on the B&B, your limitation is where your drive shaft loop is in the car. So essentially, the fitment, you can only fit about a 6 3/4 inch of length there. So anything longer than that literally won't fit.
Oh, gotcha. I didn't know that. That's nice to know. Travis, can you explain to me the effect of going from a 3 to a 2 on the left rear of an IMCA stock car? Well, basically what it does, of course, number one, it changes left side percentage. So you're going to gain, if you go from a 3 to a 2, you're actually going to gain a little bit of side bite because the right rear just got a little heavier. Unless, of course, you rescale it, of course, which is probably what you should do. The 2-inch wheel, it's that old driving aspect of how it aligns with the left front. When you have the left rear wheel inside the left front, that's telling the race car that it wants to turn the car under the driving wheel because it's the heaviest wheel on the race car is that left rear. That's telling the race car that it's supposed to turn left, which is, of course, normally what we would want it to do. However, we don't want it to keep turning left off the corner, so going to a 2-inch wheel actually squares that drive line up to the point where now all of a sudden my left rear tire is tracking my left front tire pretty straight, so it's going to come off the corner straighter. So a 2-inch wheel is definitely, in my opinion, going to give you a lot more traction up off the corner. In fact, we've actually went to the 62-inch rear ends and actually moved that left rear out further yet. And I think, there's sometimes certain track conditions that are real heavy might hurt us a little bit, but overall, how many features are actually heavy? So I still think we just need to get those cars off the corner because they're a little bit short on traction to begin with. So anything we can do to help that, we'll do that. I hope that explains that well. Pat, great answer. Merry Christmas, all you too, Pat. I hope you have a great Christmas and the grandkids and of course Santa Claus. Why, Pat, you'd make a good Santa Claus. Yeah. You see old Pat in a Santa suit? He'd look pretty good. Brett, what advice would you give a driver who struggles to hit his marks mid to late race? I think he needs to work out more because he's falling out of the seat. In fact, one of our local drivers and I had that discussion the other day that we're going to have to quit giving up them spots at the end of the race because we do really good for the whole race, but that last 5 laps, I don't like seeing anybody go backwards.
Mike, do you have any routines that you do for focus?
Well, I saw that question and that's one that really stuck out to me because self-reflection is really important. And, even after doing it as long as what I have, I actually I have a spreadsheet where I keep track of results, where I start versus where I finish all the way throughout the year. And at the end of the year, I will self-reflect on every individual race on what happened and what I could have done different. But from a driving standpoint, I think you could use the basketball reference to where if you're a shooter, you need to see the ball going through the rim. And, so on a basketball terms, it's, let's shoot some free throws and let's just see it happen. Well, in a racing standpoint, you need laps, let's get out there and try to race as much as I can. So if you're struggling at the end, I would say maybe you need to add another night during the weekend. And that's going to help you get better for sure.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can't beat seat time. I mean, I don't care what you say. I mean, it's
absolutely.
Seat time is just that's the ultimate.
You missed Jeff there.
I missed Jeff. I did miss Jeff. Amod, normally tight on entry off the throttle, would going to a 2-inch offset right front wheel to a 3-inch help? Actually, I don't think so. I think what would happen is your tight entry off the throttle is a right rear issue, not a right front issue. you're getting on the right rear real hard, and if you're off the throttle, you're not powering it up to pull it up off the right rear. So the car is actually kind of falling, and it's like getting all kinds of side bite because there's no traction to actually, or no power to lift it up. If you went to a 3-inch wheel, the right front's gonna try to stick, but it's gonna roll to the right rear even more. And so the problem is actually going to start out to the point where you're going to start out and it's going to feel a little bit more drivable, but it'll fall on the right rear and actually just make that problem further into the corner worse than what it would be on corner entry. I think you'd end up having more of an issue when you get down into the corner than what you would with the right rear. I would actually recommend probably spacing the right rear out is what I would probably say I would do. Okay. Kyle said thanks. We agree with that. Let's see. IMCA Sport Mod. More aggressive left rear shock. Up on the bars quicker and longer. Will it help it turn easier? Yes, it will definitely help it turn easier because it puts the rear steer in the car faster. The problem we run into sometimes is it can actually steer too quickly to the point where it can actually get you a little bit free and then go to a throttle type situation to the point where the car will get down in the center of the corner and it will actually start to be tight and then it'll get free on you. Or I'll rephrase that. It will actually start to be free on you. And then once you throttle it up, it starts to get tight on you. So sometimes that can be a little bit finicky. Kind of depends on the driver and how the driver actually, how he uses his brake pedal and how he drives the car. If you could get by with less shock, you're going to have more traction. The stiffer the shock is, the more it does the things that you want it to do, but it doesn't necessarily give the car actual traction. It appears like it's traction, but it actually is not traction. Like, in other words, if you had a 15.2 on the left rear and you could go to a 10.2 and still keep the car up, the 10.2 is definitely going to give you more traction. But the race is won in the center of the corner, and that 15.2 is definitely going to probably be better in the center of the corner. Okay, what spring cup do you recommend on the front of a GRT USRA B mod? OD grab, drop, or flat? ID grab, drop, or flat without the bearing? Well, I definitely like the drop cup with the bearing is what I would put on it. Those, yeah, definitely. The OD drop cup would be my choice. What's your recommendations, Chad?
Yeah, I would always use a drop cup in the right front just to get that initial roll, and then having the advantage of the spring table is huge. Being able to run a deep bearing and a drop cup, and then allowing you to run a stiffer spring to get the exit traction is, I think, one of the most important features in the car. In the USRA B mod, unfortunately, the fun police took the bearings away from the front springs, so you can't run a Torrington bearing on the front springs because they weren't designed for the front springs, is what the tech man told me. And that didn't make a lot of sense because they work in the back, and we didn't discriminate. We just made a 5-inch bearing for every 5-inch spring. So we're currently arguing that out with the USRA officials, but they took that away for the time being. But so don't put that in there. If you win at Deer Creek, you're probably not going to pass tech.
Well,
yeah. So
I won't say nothing.
Yeah, I was as politically correct as I could be there, I think.
Yeah.
I think my ears are turning a little red, though.
Kyle said, Pat said to ask Mike what drive shaft length you run in a B&B stock car, 17 chassis with short rear end yoke.
Well, of course, there's some variables here. I'm assuming you're running a mid plate. I will assume you're running a standard transmission, like a Brin, versus, there are some that are a little bit longer or shorter. But so I run a mid plate with the old style Brin, the 70,001 part number, and my drive shaft length is 50 3/4 with the 6 3/4 inch slip yoke.
Gotcha. Okay, we have two more questions before we go. I've noticed the right front spring pockets are really getting relocated outside the frame rails. The car's front track width seems to be really the offset from the rear. Front track width, especially right front area, seems to be go to comments, advice, or preference on front track width versus rear track width. Well, I always try to run the front probably 1.5 inches wider than the rear on a modified. Stock car probably only 1 inch. That would be my suggestion, as far as him noticing the pockets. What we're basically doing on the pockets is we're actually relocating them so that now that we get a lot of travel on the springs, what was happening is with the amount of travel that we were getting, the spring wasn't working properly. It wasn't compressing. It was bowing the spring because the right front jack bolt wasn't in the right location. So we've relocated those to get it so that the actual spring area goes in a circle, well, anyway, it goes in line so that the spring is fully functional. Tyson, with the new ride height rule, how are you going to be able to load numbers with the lower ride height numbers? I myself can't answer that question yet. That's something that we've kind of been talking over in the shop, and we just kind of we really can't really say I have an answer for that question. Do you, Mike?
Well, while we're on that ride height rule, may I say that having that same rule for the hobby stocks is probably one of the dumbest things I've ever seen them come out with when they have a spec height spring, spec tire, and no weight jacks. But on the stock cars, yeah, I don't really know yet. I don't think it's going to affect me personally. Tyson, your car doesn't really look like it's in a lot of attitude, from what I've seen. So I think that's what the rule was designed for, is the basically set up in attitude right away. And I don't, without having the car together, that's really hard to answer. And I hate to be vague on that, but Chad's probably been around this deal a long time and might be able to offer a little bit more.
I don't have a lot of data there in that situation at all. But the ride height's lower now?
Well, they've given us specific ride heights, and actually some are, well, Mike, I don't.
So you get a range, basically, that your frame has to be a minimum height.
Yeah.
Minimum and a maximum.
Yeah.
So like I say, on that hobby stock deal, it's totally stupid because it's like whatever it is, it's like they really can't cheat that, and if they are, then everybody is. So, but yeah, on the stock car deal, I really don't think it's going to affect me, but I need to get my car together so I can see.
I think it's going to affect some manufacturers more than others. And
I agree. Yes.
And I don't, from what I have seen on the B&B side of it, I don't actually seeing it being a huge effect. I mean, it's going to have some, but it's minimal, in my personal opinion. All righty. Well, don't forget, we will draw for these gifts, Chad's ball joint wrench, and this tomorrow morning, and she'll put that online so that you all know, so we can get these sent out to you. Merry Christmas to everybody, and we will see you in the new year. Thanks, Mike, for joining us. I appreciate it. Sorry you get to eat a cold steak, but
I'm sure you feel really terrible for me. But,
I mean, I think it really sucks, but I mean, just saying. But anyway, I appreciate it. And Chad, you have a good week and Merry Christmas. I doubt that I'll probably talk to you between now and then. And you too, Mike, have a Merry Christmas, you and your wife and family. So this is, we'll see everybody January 8th.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.